the moment you ask for directions, the moment you ask for help, they're like human GPSs. Like I remember multiple times, but in particular my first transfer, asking a guy, me and my trainer, we went and asked a guy for directions to this place, because in Portugal, it's not like the grid here in Utah or in Provo. In Portugal, like if you need a street or you need a house somewhere, you just build on top of whatever, it's, you know, so it's just crazy streets. And so it was hard to find some of the houses. And I remember this one time we asked, and the guy, we just asked this, I think he was at a gas station, and we asked the guy for help on directing us. And he's like, oh, I'm not sure exactly. I feel like I know where that is, but let me go check real quick. And he brings like 2 or 3 other guys that were in a cafe and a little bar, and he comes and brings them, and they literally take us to this spot. Like all 4 of these guys take us to the spot, and then we say goodbye, gave them a couple cards of the church, and then they left. But it was at least a half-mile walk, and so that's just who they are. They're super helpful, and they'll give the best directions. They're literally human GPSs. It's incredible. They'll be like, so you're going to want to turn right at this street, you're going to see a pink mailbox. Once you see that pink mailbox, you want to keep going straight for about 2 more blocks, turn left at that second block, do this and this, and then you're there. And it's like the exact directions they give you. So that's a cultural thing. They're super helpful. When you're leaving a Portuguese home, you never open the door to leave. They will always open the door for you, because when you open the door, it's just kind of you saying that you're not coming back type of thing. So they will open the door for you. Always let them do that. Portuguese food is so good. Portuguese bread is bread sent from God. It is so good. Like, because it has the crisp, it's crisp on the outside and warm, but then it's super soft on the inside. So it's just perfect. And the bread is even more incredible because Portugal, they're very good at making soup. I mean, they have one in particular that's well known throughout all the country that's called caldo verde. And it's just this little soup, this green soup with a little chorizo inside it. And you just dip your bread in it, and it's incredible. Their pastries are really good. So the most well-known one in Portugal and even in Europe is called the pastel de Belém, which is, I don't know if it translates perfectly, but the Bethlehem pastry. And it is so good. It's just this little tart with this yummy custard in the middle. They have what they call the bolo de Berlim, which isn't unique to Portugal, but it's just this donut filled with that same custard that's in a similar custard that's in the pastel de Belém. It's like pretty much a donut filled with goodness, pretty much. And so their pastries are delicious. They have what they call chocolate salami in Portugal, and there's not actually salami in it. I mean, I was told there was, but there's not actually salami in it. It looks like a salami, but it's made of chocolate, and it's really good. It's super good. In Portugal, if you're going to go to Portugal, you have to try one drink, and it's called brisa. Brisa just translates to breeze. In Madeira is the one that is the part of the Portugal that actually creates it, and it's just this drink that is so good. And being on the island drinking it, it's even better. But they have flavors. The main 2 flavors are apple and maracujá, which is passion fruit. And if you go to Portugal, you just got to try it. It is so good. It's so good. So Portuguese, like many other languages, is derived from Latin-based roots. So for those who are speaking English, there's going to be a lot of familiar words that you hear. Especially for those who speak Spanish, you're going to hear a lot of words that are very familiar. You can't structure a Portuguese sentence exactly like you do American. You can in some ways where, like, you say I am when you have a subject and a verb, like I am, I eat, I do this. That's okay. But as far as other things, like, it's not structured similarly. Like a Portuguese sentence, you never end with a preposition. You'll never end with, like, for example, if you're going on a date with a girl, I would never ask in Portuguese, who are you going with? I would never end with the word com or with in Portuguese. It'd always be, I would start, with whom are you? With whom are you going to the date? So just stuff like that. Portuguese language is so beautiful, man. It is very similar to Spanish. A lot of Spanish speakers says it's like he's speaking with a bunch of rocks in your mouth, right? I disagree. But the Portugal accent is really cool. Because, like I told you, there are so many different parts that speak Portuguese. The Portuguese accent in Portugal is very different from the one in Brazil. It's very similar to American English and English, like England English. So English is much more formal. You hear the tall ah like that. Or in America, we have our like here in Utah, mountain. We just have different ways of saying things, and we have our own slang. It's the exact same thing in Portugal and Brazil. Portugal is much more formal. The way you pronounce things, the grammar structure is way more followed and used than it is in Brazil. And in Portugal, the way they speak is much more shut in their mouths. It's much more shut, whereas in Brazil, it's a lot more animated. It's a lot more, your mouth's a little bit more open, but they have cool slang in Brazil, and it's beautiful. So because there's all these different parts that speak Portuguese, it's just different accents and different words and slang that they use. So it's kind of cool. Some of my like first impressions when I first got to Portugal is, especially in comparison to America, is everything in Portugal is smaller. I mean, in America, we have big things, like we have big cars, big trucks. Product sizes are bigger, like shampoo bottles. Everything's just bigger in America compared to Portugal. There was never a week in my mission that I didn't hit my head on a chandelier. Never. I mean, everything is just super low, the ceilings. So the people are, I mean, you still have your tall people, but overall, it's not that, everything's not that big. They have their smart cars. That was one of my first impressions, like, man, everything's super tiny here. The showers, you're always like standing above the showers. So, man, Portugal life, it's a humble life. The money system there is the euro, and the Portuguese economy took a big shot from switching to the euro. And because of that, they're in a, I'm not sure how bad, it's still pretty bad, but they call it the crisis. Like anytime you talk to someone on the street about how they are, they will bring up the crise or the crisis that's going on. And so because of that, it's a very humble life for most people. They're all barely making rent. It's just a very, very humble life. The housing in Portugal is, it's not insulated. They're just cement buildings, and they take a lot of pride in it. They love it because if a hurricane were to come or whatever, they would be fine. They actually make fun of American housing. I've talked to people where they make fun of American housing for that purpose. But there's just these big cement buildings, so it gets super cold in the winter. Like I remember sitting next to heaters, lying next to heaters when we fell asleep at night because it's so cold. The buildings are all apartments. It's all apartment buildings. I mean, there are some areas with houses or whatever, but overall, the lifestyle is apartment building. It's not often that you'll see someone with a dryer unless they have a lot of money or a little bit more. So you'll wash your clothes and you'll hang dry. That's the thing there. You always hang dry your clothes. And so in the winter, because it's so humid in Portugal and it's cold, it'll take days for your clothes to dry as you leave it to hang. So that's kind of fun. Overall, Portugal is like, climate-wise, is one of the most beautiful climates. It's right next to the ocean, so you do get the wind, you do get the humidity and stuff, but in the summer it's really warm. It gets super hot. Madeira, for example, on the island of Madeira, it was super hot. Walking around your sweat all day isn't the best thing, but it gets really warm. But then in the winter, especially over in the northern part of Portugal, it gets really cold. There are some parts where it will snow a little bit, but because that humidity just cuts through you, and it rains a ton during the winter. One of the things I noticed is there's a lot of construction in Portugal. That is a big thing. Cobblestone in Portugal. All the sidewalks are mostly made of cobblestone, which is very uncomfortable to walk on after 2 years. It beats your shoes up. And so there's tons of people who do that to help out with a cobblestone, because the people I taught were more humble people, so they didn't have all these skills that these higher classmen had. And so a lot of people I met was finding jobs in construction, finding jobs in restaurants. Portugal, up in the north, they have mountains and mountains just covered with grapes, and that is to make their wine. Portugal is one of the strongest industries as far as making wine. It's very well known, and so there's a lot of jobs, especially in the north, in the wine industry. That's one of their biggest products. They're also huge in cork. It's kind of random, but Portugal is well known for making cork. Fishing is also a big industry, especially in the south. I mean, I served in Lagos, which is probably the most well-known beach resort in Portugal and even Europe. And they were just fishermen all the time, just doing their thing. And so those are some of the bigger industries there. Some of the cultural differences, like with food, for example, and shopping. Like, I don't know about you, but here in America, my family, we stock up. Like you buy weekly or every 2 weeks as much as you can. Or Portugal, it's not like that. They will grab things based on the week, but I met many people who go visit the store daily, especially to get your fresh bread. Portugal's bread is so good. I miss Portuguese bread so much. Oh man, it's so good. And so that's something that's something you do daily. You get your bread, you get your fresh soup. ingredients to make soup. And so that's a difference. In Portugal, their meal is lunch. Their meal is lunch. So the breakfast, it'll be very light. They'll have some bread, maybe some fruit, but it's lunch. Everything shuts down for like 2 hours, and everyone just takes their sweet time, just eating lunch, enjoying company. And then dinner, I ate with many families that had a 3-course meal for dinner. It's very, as far as the Portuguese people, not necessarily like the Africans and the other people there, but Portuguese, they had the 3-course meal. It's very formal. You start out with your good soup. In Portugal's soup is so good. It started with soup, the main course, and then a nice dessert. Like, it was really formal. It was kind of cool. So that's kind of a difference. The transportation of Portugal is they have a metro system in specific cities. They always have buses. They have trains that go throughout all of Portugal. And those can get pretty pricey depending on where you're going. I was in the south, so I got to be along the beaches all the time. And the beaches is definitely something I'd return for. They're nice beaches. Just like in Brazil, there's a Cristo Rei, the big statue of Jesus Christ. We have one in Portugal, just right across the port from Lisbon. And then there's so much history in Lisbon that I would just go through everything. They have the Torre de Belém, the Bethlehem Tower is what they call it. They have castles everywhere in Portugal. I was able to visit one in Tomar. Tomar has this, they call it the Convento de Cristo, the Christ Convent. It's an amazing castle where the Templar Knights, anyways, they would meet there. But yeah, so there's castles all across from the north to the south of Portugal that are amazing and that you want to see. Madeira, you gotta visit Madeira. It's just so beautiful. The area I first started out in Madeira was actually the area that Cristiano Ronaldo grew up in, the famous soccer player. And so we'd ask people about him. All these people remember him and grew up with him. And we actually went and knocked his old house just so we said that we did, you know. And he wasn't there, obviously, because he's rich, but it was worth a shot. But the farther north you go, the greener it gets. So it's very green in the north. It's very beautiful. I want to call their mountains like ours. So I'd say they're more like big hills. But they do have nice little small mountain ranges in Portugal. But the further south you get, because it's so warm, it does get pretty dry, like in Beja. And then even in the south where I've served Fado in those places, it's much more dry. So you get a cool little feel for everything. And then Madeira is actually very mountainous. Madeira is like an island mountain. It's just like goes super high. So you're either, when I was serving there, you're either going up or you're going down. Like my legs got super strong while I was serving Madeira because there was so much walking up hills. One of the things that I noticed right off the bat being in Portugal is I love music. I love music, and they have some good music. But one that's very unique to Portugal that stood out to me is called Fado, which means fate. And it's kind of like a folk type music that they play, and they play with this, I can't remember the name, this special type of guitar. And it's just, the sound of it is very sad. It's lamenting. It's super deep, but it just kind of defines who they are as people. Like, they've been through a lot of hardships, and so I always love listening to that. Fadistas sing and perform their music. They have one tradition called Festa de São João, so like the Festa de Saint John, and they eat sardines. But one of the funny things that they do, and you can look this up on YouTube, is at night they'll start smacking each other with hammers on their head. Not real hammers, but like the air-filled ones. So like if you look it up on YouTube, there's just literally a video of people just smacking each other with these little air balloon hammers. And it's just a part of the tradition. Christmas and Easter are very, very big in Portugal. Being a Catholic people, they're very important. You'll still see lights, you'll still see Christmas trees and stuff like that. But it is a tradition. As far as of the areas I served in, you always open one present before you go to bed, before you wake up on Christmas Day. So that's one thing they always do. The most important food in Portugal is bacalhau. Can't believe I forgot that. Bacalhau is codfish. And they have books of like 100, 200 ways to make it. And it's so good. And that's like their main dish. They eat it on Christmas, they eat it on Easter. I mean, if you're eating bacalhau, you're being very spoiled, because that's just a huge part of who they are. So bacalhau is really good. Portugal was like the original founders of so many places. I mean, they were the navigators of the world. I mean, Christopher Columbus at one point came through Portugal and married actually a Portuguese woman. And so they founded and conquered so many little places, and that's why there's so many Portuguese-speaking nations. There's Portuguese-speaking nations in Africa. There's some in Asia, some in India, just everywhere. And it's because of their navigating in what was it, the 1400s, just all those times. And then Spain ended up taking a lot of those things, a lot of those areas, and they reconquered a lot of it. They are so proud of who they are. From the ones I talked to, they're proud of being Portuguese. They're proud of their language. I mean, if you went up to a Portuguese and asked them to help you understand their language, they would take as long as you needed to help you understand. They're just proud of who they are. I love that about them. They're super confident. Sometimes that pride gets a little bit strong, but it's a good proud a lot of the time. I remember I had to yawn, and I yawned super big. Like, it was like my mouth was wide open, and a guy walked right in front of me as I did it, and he kind of just did, and then kept walking. So it's really disrespectful to keep your mouth open when you're yawning. You should cover. So a poor attempt at Portuguese. So this is stuff I would hear. I'd be, eu gostar muito de comer bacalhau. Gostar muito. Eu estar missionário para dois anos. 2 anos. Huh? So that's the best I can do. That's a typical American accent. Olá, meus amigos. Sou muito grato para poder falar com vocês agora. Já há muito tempo que não vejo vocês. Eu espero que tudo esteja bem e que a vida corra bem com vocês também. Eu quero que vocês saibam que eu penso todos os dias em vocês e as experiências que eu tive lá naquela terra. Vocês sempre terão um lugar no meu coração que eu nunca vou esquecer. Amo vocês todos, espero que sejam felizes. E tchau, fica bem.